The cameras were rolling. The host thought he had Denzel trapped, but in just seconds, the Hollywood legend turned the tables and left the entire crowd in complete silence. The studio buzzed with electric anticipation. The set of the late night spotlight was a sleek, modern affair polished chrome accents, a glittering cityscape backdrop, and a circular stage bathed in warm amber light. The audience, a mix of young professionals, die-hard fans, and curious onlookers, filled the tiered seats, their murmurs blending with the soft hum of the house band tuning up. The air smelled faintly of coffee and stage makeup, a reminder of the long hours the crew had put in to make this episode perfect. Tonight was no ordinary show. The guest was Denzel Washington, a titan of Hollywood whose presence alone could command a room. But the host, Ryan Kessler, had other plans. Ryan, a rising star in late-night television, had built his brand on sharp wit and a carefully curated image as a progressive firebrand. His monologues were peppered with viral sound bites, his interviews designed to elicit applause or outrage, depending on the guest. At 38, with a boyish grin and a tailored navy suit, he exuded the confidence of a man who believed he could steer any conversation to his advantage. Tonight, his target was Denzel, a man whose career spanned decades, from glory to training day defenses, and whose reputation for integrity was as formidable as his talent. Ryan had spent weeks preparing, strategizing with his writers to craft questions that would push Denzel into a corner, to force him to align with the right cause or at least generate a headline that would dominate social media. By morning, the show began with its usual flair. The house band, a funky six-piece ensemble, kicked off with a brassy rendition of the theme song. Ryan bounded onto the stage, his arms outstretched, soaking in the applause. "Welcome to the late-night spotlight," he shouted, his voice amplified by the state-of-the-art sound system. "We've got a big show tonight, folks, one of the greatest actors of our time, Denzel Washington." The crowd erupted, their cheers a mix of genuine admiration and the Pavlovian response to a cue card flashing applause. Ryan grinned, his teeth gleaming under the lights. "But first, let's talk about what's happening in the world." For the next 8 minutes, Ryan's monologue was a masterclass in performative outrage. He riffed on the latest political scandals, climate change debates, and Hollywood's role in shaping culture. Each punchline landed with precision, the audience laughing on cue, though a few exchanged glances, sensing the agenda behind the humor. Ryan's writers had laced the monologue with subtle jabs at those who stay silent, a not-so-veiled reference to guests like Denzel, who famously avoided partisan talking points. As the monologue wrapped, Ryan took a sip of water from his branded mug, his eyes glinting with anticipation. The real show was about to begin. The band played a jazzy transition as Ryan introduced Denzel. "Ladies and gentlemen, an icon of film, a man who needs no introduction, please welcome Denzel Washington." The crowd roared as Denzel strode onto the stage, his presence effortless yet commanding. At 70, he moved with the same quiet strength that defined his performances. His charcoal suit was impeccably tailored, his tie a deep burgundy that caught the light. He waved briefly to the audience, his smile warm but reserved, and settled into the guest chair, a sleek, leather-upholstered piece that seemed almost too small for his stature. Ryan leaned forward, his elbows on the desk, his posture signaling that he was ready to dive in. "Denzel, it's an honor to have you here," Ryan began, his tone smooth, almost reverent. "You've been in this industry for over 4 decades, telling stories that resonate with millions. Let's start with your latest project. What can you tell us about it?" Denzel nodded, his hands folded casually in his lap. "It's a film about family, legacy, and the choices we make when the world's watching," he said, his voice low and measured. "It's called The Long Road Home, and I play a father trying to hold his family together in a time of crisis. It's about real human struggle, not just the headlines." The audience clapped politely, but Ryan's smile tightened. He hadn't expected Denzel to pivot so quickly to universal themes. He shifted gears. "That sounds powerful," he said. "And speaking of the world watching, we're in a pivotal moment right now, politically, culturally. Hollywood's got a big voice. Don't you think it's time for artists like you to take a stand, to use that voice for the right cause? The question hung in the air like a challenge. The audience leaned forward, sensing the shift. Ryan's use of right cause was deliberate, loaded with the implication that there was only one acceptable side. A few murmurs rippled through the crowd, some nodding in agreement, others tensing, waiting for Denzel's response. Denzel tilted his head slightly, his eyes locking onto Ryan's. A faint smile played at the corner of his mouth, not mocking, but knowing, as if he'd seen the script before. "You want me to take a side?" he asked, his voice soft but carrying a weight that silenced the room. Ryan seized the moment, his confidence surging. "Absolutely," he said, leaning closer. "With your influence, your platform, don't you feel a responsibility to speak out, to guide the conversation?" The audience held its breath. A woman in the front row gripped her purse, her eyes wide. A man in the back whispered to his friend, "Here it comes." Ryan's producers, watching from the control booth, exchanged glances. They'd prepped him for this, coached him to push until he got the soundbite they needed. Denzel leaned forward now, his elbows resting on his knees, his gaze unwavering. "My responsibility," he said, each word deliberate, "is to the truth, not to a political side, not to an agenda, and definitely not to a narrative someone else writes for me." The room went still. Ryan blinked, caught off guard, his carefully rehearsed follow-up question faltering. The audience, expecting a rote celebrity endorsement, was frozen, processing the weight of Denzel's words. A single clap broke the silence, tentative from somewhere in the middle rows. Then another. Within seconds, the crowd was on its feet, the applause swelling into a roar, not for a side, not for a cause, but for the raw, unfiltered honesty of a man who refused to be boxed in. Ryan forced a laugh, trying to regain control. "Wow, that's a powerful statement, Denzel," he said, his voice a touch too high. "But let's unpack that. The truth, as you say, can mean different things to different people. In today's climate, don't you think it's important to be clear about where you stand on issues like systemic inequality or climate justice?" Denzel didn't flinch. "You're asking me to pick a team," he said, his tone calm but edged with steel. "I don't play that game. The truth isn't a jersey you wear to signal you're one of the good guys. It's messy, it's complicated, and it doesn't fit on a bumper sticker. If you spend all your time shouting slogans, you stop listening. And when you stop listening, you stop learning. That's when you start thinking you know everything, and that's the moment you're wrong." The audience erupted again, louder this time. A woman in the balcony shouted, "Preach!" A man near the stage pumped his fist. Ryan's smile faltered, his fingers tapping nervously on his desk. He glanced at the teleprompter, but his writers hadn't prepared for this. He was on his own, trying to pivot. Ryan leaned back, adopting a more conversational tone. "Okay, fair enough," he said, "but let's talk about Hollywood. You've seen how the industry's changed more focus on representation, on accountability. As someone who's broken barriers, don't you think it's important to champion those changes?" Denzel's eyes narrowed slightly, not in anger but in focus. "I've been in this game a long time," he said. "I've fought for roles that tell real stories, stories about people, not just symbols. Representation matters, sure, but it's not about checking boxes or winning applause. It's about telling the truth about who we are, flaws, dreams, all of it. If you turn art into a soapbox, you're not creating anymore. You're preaching, and I'm not a preacher." The crowd cheered again, the energy in the room shifting. Ryan's producers were sweating now, watching the monitors as social media lit up with clips of Denzel's responses. Hashtag Denzel Speaks Truth was already trending. Ryan, sensing the momentum slipping, decided to double down. "That's a great point," he said, his voice slick with false camaraderie. "But let's be real, silence can be complicity. When you don't speak out, don't you risk letting the wrong voices dominate?" The audience gasped, the accusation hanging heavy. Ryan had crossed a line, implying Denzel's restraint was cowardice. The room felt smaller, the air thicker. All eyes turned to Denzel. He didn't react immediately. Instead, he took a slow sip of water from the glass beside him, letting the silence stretch. Then he set the glass down, leaned forward, and fixed Ryan with a look that could stop a train. "You think silence is complicity?" he said, his voice low, almost a growl. "Let me tell you something, Ryan. I've been speaking through my work for 40 years. Every role I take, every story I tell is my voice. But I don't owe you or anyone a performance to prove I'm on your team. You invited me here to talk, and that's what I'm doing. You just didn't expect me to speak my mind." The audience exploded, the applause deafening. People were standing, clapping, shouting. A woman in the third row wiped tears from her eyes. A man near the exit pumped his fist, yelling, "That's right." Ryan's face was a mask of barely concealed panic. He tried to laugh it off, but it came out strained. "Well, you've certainly given us something to think about," he said, glancing at the clock. The segment was supposed to end 5 minutes ago, but the control booth signaled to keep going. The ratings were through the roof for the next 10 minutes. Ryan tried to steer the conversation to safer ground. Denzel's early career, his Oscar wins, his mentorship of younger actors. But Denzel, now in full command of the room, answered each question with the same unflinching honesty. When Ryan asked about his advice for young actors, Denzel said, "Stay curious. Don't let anyone tell you what you're supposed to think. Read, listen, question everything. The world's too big for one-size-fits-all answers." When Ryan tried to circle back to politics, Denzel shut it down with a single line. "I'm here to talk about life, not headlines." As the segment neared its close, Ryan made one last attempt to reclaim the narrative. "Denzel, you've given us a lot to chew on," he said, his tone now cautious. "But if you had one message for America right now, what would it be?" Denzel paused, his eyes scanning the audience, then settling back on Ryan. "Stop looking for saviors," he said. "Nobody's coming to fix it all for you, not politicians, not actors, not talk show hosts. You want change? Start with yourself. Listen to someone you disagree with, learn something you didn't know. Be humble enough to admit you might be wrong. That's how we move forward." The audience rose to its feet one final time, the applause thundering through the studio. Ryan stood too, clapping weakly, his smile tight. The band kicked in, playing them to commercial, but the music was barely audible over the crowd's roar. Denzel leaned back in his chair, calm as ever, his work done. As the cameras panned out, Ryan's voice cracked slightly as he said, "We'll be right back after this." But everyone in the room and the millions watching at home knew the real show was over. Denzel had walked into a trap and turned it into a masterclass in truth, leaving Ryan and the agenda he'd tried to push in the dust fade to black.